All right, everyone, welcome to this podcast. So, I'm right here today with Rick Balden. He's a professional photographer and he's going to take us on his journey into everything that he's been doing. He's very experienced, and I've actually had the opportunity of working with him before with my daughter, and he has so much to tell us about his journey and what he has been doing in the past few years, many years. Rick, welcome here. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I want you to kind of start this journey, letting people know how is it that a professional athlete became a professional photographer?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I was really excited about you reaching out. I love kind of telling my story because it is different. It is unique. I'm extremely passionate about what I do. Extremely passionate about photography, and especially the subgenre, which we'll get into, my dance photography, which I absolutely is becoming a huge passion of mine. So yeah, I mean, my story is I'll just give you kind of little clip notes of my upbringing. So I grew up a country boy, upstate New York, and I was blessed with really kind of unique physical strength. I just God had blessed me with that, and I learned to develop that over through years, and played football in college, and end up becoming a professional athlete, as a professional world's strongest man competitor, Guinness Book World Record holder. I played football, and I was doing this for several years, and I love the competitiveness of it. And so when I started transitioning from my career of doing that, I built a sports nutrition company with some friends, and always working around athletes. I've always been around athletes. But initially, when I was doing my photography, as I was tying it in, I was working with other similar athletes, football players, professional fighters, really kind of, intense people. And motorsports, I worked with for years. I work with equestrian, actually, photography. And what happened was one of my interns for my sports nutrition company, her name was Tracy. And this is about going on about 9 years ago. I didn't know she was at the time. She was a professional ballerina with the Charlotte Ballet. And I'm kind of a sarcastic person. I don't know if that grows on people or not, but I love just kind of joking around. I'm like, Tracy, you're rubbing your feet. What are you rubbing your feet for? She's, oh, I danced the other night. And I'm like, Tracy, I would love to put a dancer in my portfolio. So for all these years, when I started off as landscape photography. I was traveling. I was doing different sports, and I will say this I'm almost embarrassed to say this now because I know better. But when I think dancer, I'm a person that didn't know anything about dance. I have no background in dance. I didn't dance. My wife didn't dance. None of my siblings danced. My daughters did a little bit. They kind of tried out, as most young girls. I have two amazing daughters. And but I didn't really know anything about dance. And when you say it to someone who doesn't know anything about dance and after a former athlete, we think of dancers being small and petite, and because they're so nimble, we think in terms of them not as being as strong. And again, I'm embarrassed to say that now because I know better. But back then, I'm like, okay, this will be fun, and I'll go out with Tracy, and she'll do some leaps, and it'll be really kind of nice and all that. So we went out, and what I'm kind of known for is my lighting patterns. I use a little bit what I call athletic lighting. It's a little higher contrast. It shows muscle definition really well, and that's what I use in my athletes. So I'm dealing like a professional fighter or something. They're really intense, and there's a lot of contrast. They look really intense. So I used a little bit of this lighting with her, and I'll never forget it. She did grand jeté, and I literally, it's like the first photo I ever took of a dancer, and I went, holy smokes. I couldn't believe it. I literally was absolutely in love at that point. Not with Tracy. She's lovely, but I was in love with her. And I went, wow, I really can't believe how strong. And you can see the muscle definition in the legs and all that. And I looked at Tracy. I said, Tracy, is this normal? She's like, oh yeah, all dancers are really strong. And throughout the years, as I started working with more and more dancers, I noticed even the little ones. I mean, I work with as young as 5, 6 years old, and I've seen like 8, 9-year-old girls with abs, and I was like, wow. What happened for me was it was a light bulb. I'm like, for someone who doesn't know, and this is really the funny part, is when I do stuff on athletic wise, if I'm playing football or something like that, I'm hitting somebody. It's very violent. It looks violent. It is. Dance is opposite. Dance is incredibly hard to do, but they're made to look easy. everything's a smile on the face in perfect form, and you can't lose your composure. Well, if you hit someone really hard in football, you kind of stand up and do a dance. It's like, yeah, it's really hard. And I didn't really put it together until I started working with dancers. I'm like, they are really super high level athletes. And I was just so impressed and so really, I just fell in love. I fell in love with the art form. And I think because I looked at it through an athletic lens. So I went to my first Nutcracker ballet because I started working with some dancers at Charlotte Ballet. And it was the first ballet I'd ever been to in my entire life ever. And I went there and I was like glued. It was so funny. I got my little girls there. I got my wife there. We brought my in-laws and I'm like watching and they're looking at me like I'm watching it, studying like someone would watch like a football game or something. I'm like, oh, I can't believe how cool this is. And I loved it so much. I came back again the same week. I came back later in the week and watched the same exact show like 4 or 5 days later. And now I'm at the point like if the ballet's coming, I'll grab my daughters. They're not asking me to go. I'm asking them to go with me. And several performances just by myself. And I just love it. And I've become friends with so many dancers now and all of that. But my history kind of in, photography is just something, I've enjoyed doing. It's something that's completely different, very relaxing for me. And then it transitioned to that dance where it took things I was passionate about that I was pretty good at as far as doing the athletic type of look. And it's been an amazing journey. Nara, I'll tell you, it's been really amazing.
This is so cool. What I think is interesting about your story is that it's interesting, but I'm pretty sure that that's how a lot of people feel about dance, especially if they don't have any experience with dance in their family, their background. They don't know what it is. I can compare your experience with my husband because, I have a dance background. I grew up, around dance. I was a dancer when I was younger. So my family had experienced that. But for him, he had no idea what this was. So when I put my daughter in dance, at first, he had a hard time even like, he especially once she became more serious about dance, before then he had that relationship. Oh, this is just something that she's doing for fun. Like it's a hobby. It's cute. She's a little girl. I'm just, paying money so she can be cute at this class and do this girly thing. Right.
Yep.
As a dad.
Yep.
And then as she started growing up and as my daughter started taking so serious because she's a very disciplined, serious girl, a very committed, very athletic mindset. She looks like an athlete. She takes dance like an athlete. It impresses him. And he's like, okay, wait a minute. And then he went to a dance competition. He's looking at other dancers and he's like, oh, so this is dance. Okay. And that's when he actually became extremely like invested in it. And that's when he started like getting emotional with it because he saw how much work it took for like, he saw, our daughter like working, inside of the house, like outside of the house, doing all her tricks. Like she was constantly practicing and what it took to prepare to get that. So the whole thing for him kind of also was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that you guys dancers like that were putting that much time and effort into it. And then she was on stage doing all these acrobatic moves and these very difficult moves, like absolutely incredible, but looked so easy. And he was like, So I think it's very good that you're bringing this up because it can expand people's minds about what, the world of a dancer. Obviously, we're talking about, more on the competitive and many hours a week type of dance. But it's just incredible because I think he had the same experience and he loves it now. It's really cool.
It's really enlightening. It feels like, and I certainly can't speak for him, but I look back now, again, I said earlier, I'm like, God, I feel embarrassed. I didn't know how hard it was before. And just because I never had experience with it. And, I joke to my dancers, I say it jokingly, I'm like, when you're doing these moves, you should be screaming like, rah, like you do, when you do a plie or do whatever. You say, well, I said, because in other sports, I play tennis, I'm hitting the ball, I hit track. There's all these, your grunts and groans. The sensory for the viewer says that's difficult because I'm grunting or groaning or moving or there's a pop, a hit or something like that. So with dancers, I say that, of course, jokingly because you can't do that in dance, but and then I jokingly say as well, I said, if I put a pair of Pointe shoes on and I went on Pointe, I'd be in the ER. Probably in like 2 minutes. I'd be in the ER. My ankle would literally snap off. And so no, I have so much respect. And I think too, it's such a phenomenal way for people to channel themselves into something that's productive and they're passionate about and they can express it. And you've got the competitions, and it's just wonderful. It is really wonderful being, and all sorts of dance as well. And that's another thing. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, because then you start working with dancers and they're like, I don't think I've ever worked with one dancer ever that says, I only do this one style. Like I do ballet and lyrical and tap and jazz and contemporary. And I'm like, oh, wow. And so many of them do so many different cross. And again, it's, I find it really fascinating, to be honest with you. So
yeah, especially today's like the way the dance is going now. I can tell you from when I was growing up, it used to be that you're like a ballerina. If you're a ballerina, you are a ballerina. That's it. You focus on ballet techniques, and you have even like the body, the movements of a ballerina. Today is nothing like that. And even with tap, it was like, if you're a tap dancer, yes, you know ballet, but you are a tap dancer. Today, dance has evolved so much. There's so many different styles, and these kids have become so incredible. Like the teachers have become so good at what they do that they started adding all these different styles. Like, like we have acrobatics, tap, jazz, ballet, contemporary, hip hop. So this one kid is doing it all, and they are excited to exploring all the other styles. So most kids today are doing so many different styles of dances, which makes them so even more on the athletic side, but diverse, to be able to, if they want to pursue this as a career, it makes it where they're adaptable for any kind of dance, that they can take. But also the kids love it. And I think we have had really good instructors and choreographers today in all these different areas. And it's exciting to see. But tell me a little bit, because I think you shared with me a little bit about your background story of being raised by very strong women. And then I think this also has there's an aspect of it that got you excited about going to dance and seeing all the strong women in dance. Can you talk about the correlation into both of them?
There's been a lot of really strong women in my life. I've been very blessed, to be honest with you. Both my grandfathers had passed before I was born. I didn't know either one of them. One of my grandmothers on my father's side passed when I was about 10 years old. So my main grandmother, Alavia, on my mom's side, I was very, very close with, and she's an incredibly strong woman. I mean, I grew up in the country in the middle of nowhere, raised 8 children by herself, no running water inside, had a well. I mean, it was just, strong, tough. And this is way upstate New York, close to Canada, and brutal winters up there, little fireplace to heat the entire house. So when you're around that and around people like that, they're just tough, then it kind of rubs off on you a little bit, right? So my grandfathers were, again, I didn't know either one of my grandfathers, so I was very close to her. Obviously mom and dad, and I have 4 sisters. So my 4 sisters were kind of tough on me. Not in a bad way. They're all older, so.
Were you the youngest?
I should say I'm not. I do have one younger sister. So I have a total of 5 siblings, 6 of us total. 5 are older, and then me, and then my little sister. So anyway, but no, so around 4 sisters, and then my sports nutrition company. We have 28 employees, and 25 of them are females.
So no way! Wow.
25 females in my other company. I obviously have an amazing wife, 2 amazing daughters, no boys, just 2 girls. In motorsports, and this is why I'm kind of laughing, because I'm known. I work with all the best female racers pretty much in the world, and I'm kind of known because my photography I do a lot of portraiture photography, which most people that are at a racetrack, they do like sports action, that normally don't do portraits, or 2 polar different things. And I'm one of the few photographers that have been doing action photography for about 30 years and portraiture for about 25. So I was hired by some major publications to work with some of the greatest female athletes, racers out there. So I'm around strong women all the time. Oh, and actually, I forgot to mention this too. I shot equestrian professionally for 10 years, and that's almost all females. There's some men, but it's almost all females. And these are young girls. These are girls between the age of, you start riding at age 3 and 4 years old in some cases. My daughter Olivia started at 18 months old, so I was working with an equestrian facility, and so both my daughters were riding when they were young. So I was around strong women there, and I do these horse shows. There would be 250 riders, 230 of them were females, girls, mostly young girls. And then I've worked with like high-end equestrian, and those are almost all girls and they're doing the big jumps. So I've been around strong women like all the time. So I just adore being around strong women. I like empowering them, encouraging them. Having 2 daughters, I want to make sure they're very strong, mentally and physically, emotionally. And I want to support them, let them know they can do anything they want to do. So I love encouraging them. I love complimenting people in general, but I just love complimenting girls because it's funny because you can't really see here, but I'm like a big guy. I'm kind of intimidating looking. I don't try to be intimidating, but I'm just I'm 6'4" and 285 pounds, a physical guy. So it's very easy to be intimidated. So I kind of go the opposite direction. I joke around and it's kind of play around, fun and exciting. So I love that because probably some people walk in my studio and they're like, whoa, and then they see that I'm kind of just like loosen up a little bit. I think it's a unique dichotomy, and it works for me with my photography because I'm definitely not the normal type of photographer that does dance. I mean, I've never met anyone else like me that was a big kind of retired male athlete that shoots dance. So yeah, that's kind of it. All those ties.
Yeah, and I'll share a little bit of my experience so people can hear and understand. So when I met Rick, I was, my daughter was representing this company, Drag Queen Girl. They do dance wear, and she was gonna go to New York Fashion Week to do this, runaway for the first time. And I had never done a photo shoot with her at all. So, obviously the owner was like, "Hey, there's gonna be a photo shoot for Drag Queen Girls, North Carolina. If you guys want to check it out, Rick, and if you want to go." So my husband and I was like, "Oh, let's go. That would be a great opportunity." But I had never done a photo shoot with my daughter before. And I was a little bit hesitant because I'm like, okay, we're going to go with, a man. And I'm like, do we know anything about him? So I remember asking Allie, "Hey, Allie, do you know Rick? Like you guys have had, previous experience with him?" She's like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. Girls love him. You can go." So it made me feel better. And then we showed up, and so Rick is this big guy, tall man. But from the beginning, he was so nice, so approachable, so laid back, so made us feel super comfortable. My husband was there too. Evelyn was, oh my gosh, she loved that photo shoot. She felt so, especially I think with for people who have never done it before, or even for me, I mean, I've never seen that kind of photography before. So I'm going to be honest, your style is very unique. It's very different. So we did in studio the pictures, and I remember you started taking the pictures and showing to us. I was like, how? Like it looks. First of all, it looked like my 10-year-old daughter was like 18, in the picture, but it's like she looks so like beautiful and like strong and oh my gosh, and amazing. And we absolutely love it. So it was such a great experience. You had your daughter there. She was kind of helping you. Such a sweet, like super sweet, super well behaved, like super nice with the girls. And everyone had a great time. The people who were with you, I noticed that there were some girls that had already done photo shoots with you and they loved it. They were like joking. You had food for us. Like you made it in such a nice environment, and your work was absolutely phenomenal. It was very hard to choose the pictures because I was like, I've never seen pictures like this, and it was fun. It was a fun experience. So yeah, Rick is a really good guy and really good at what he does, like a natural at like even being around people. But then, I mean, your work is, I never seen any pictures like it.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice of you. I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. It just kind of talking about that, the work a little bit, and I appreciate you sharing. And for anybody listening, it's good and healthy to go in the situation and be cautious, right? Especially if it's a man, and I'm speaking from a man's perspective. I would want, and I would instruct anyone to research your photographer a lot before you work, especially if it's a man. Not that, and again, I'm not saying this because I think anything bad's going to happen, or there's just a lot of people that own cameras that call themselves a photographer. And it's unfortunate it's the time we live in. And the joke I always say is, I own a frying pan, but I'm not a chef. Okay. We all own frying pans. We all own cameras because our phones have cameras. So there's a lot of people that call themselves a photographer that aren't. So when someone's like, "Oh, I was initially a little bit intimidated," I'm like, "Oh, that's, did you hopefully research me and look for references and look at my work and make sure that's what you want to do." And I would encourage everyone to do that. with any photographer you're working with, and make sure you see how they treat them. Look at like behind the scene videos. Are they friendly with people? Are they interpersonal? What type of photography do they do, and is that the style that you are really that you're really interested in? But it's funny because you bring up the kind of the photos, and I jokingly say it's like your daughter or anyone's daughter, they're doing the work. I'm just there trying to capture it. Like my job is like, don't screw it up. As I say it jokingly, it's like, okay, I can't screw this up. This is an amazing athlete. My responsibility is to make them look the way they are. And so it's a timing thing. And if it's a leap, catching the optimal and make sure the feet, there's a lot of little things to look for. And there's certainly skill and technical. I don't want to paint the impression it's easy to do what I do, but if you direct someone the right way and help them and understand what you're doing in the lighting, and you have a good dancer, and I mean good, I don't mean necessarily high level, just someone who can be expressive, you can get some amazing photos. But it's kind of funny because my style, and you brought this up, so I'll just talk about this briefly if it's okay. Mm-hmm. Most people, and this is how I think I'm really different in overall in the dance. And I'm not the only dance photographer that does this, but I'm one of the few that I've seen that does this. Because I think of dancers as athletes, I photograph them more similar to how I photograph an athlete. So for an example, if I want the body to look really strong and they've got muscular definition, and again, 10 years old, they got muscle. It's a matter of, can you show it? You are under normal soft light, like here, I'm in my office here, your office there. If we look at our arms, everything's soft, right? So there's no real shadows, or if the shadows are very, very faint. Well, you only show muscle definition through kind of sharp shadows. Soft shadows, it doesn't work because it just blends in. So if you think about it, if I have a muscle, to see the definition, I have to see the shadow between the muscle separation. Well, the only way to get that is use really hard contrast lighting, and you have to know how to use it, and you have to have certain modifiers to do that. But the problem is that if it's hard on the face just, again, we want this to be soft, really always, right? We want the body to have the hard lighting. So I learned over trial and error over years of positions to put them into where the body will look really strong because I'm using harder, high contrast lighting, but the face will look soft or softer, super soft. But what I found is most people, through my years of research doing it, is most people, and this is, again, one of the reasons why I didn't fully understand how strong dancers were. If you look at most dance photography, it's soft lighting. So I'm out there and the person is doing, again, a grand jeté or Firebird or whatever. You're like, oh, that's nice. And, she looks nice, but you don't really see all those little muscle bellies that they have because the light is very soft. And that's what you see probably 95% of dance photography. You see that. And that's why I think most people that don't know anything about dance, they don't really understand how powerful they really are. And when you use lighting, you could take a same exact dancer and do soft lighting and do hard lighting, and you would say, you wouldn't even think, if you cut the head off, you wouldn't even think it's the same person. And that's really, again, so I would say to anybody watching this, and I'm not claiming that I'm the world's greatest photographer. I'm not. I'm still always learning, even after 30 years of doing this. I still learn things all the time. But look at the style that you want for your child or for yourself, and match your photographer with the style that you want, and you can create some pretty amazing images.
That's great. And tell us, what are the ages of people you're working with, women, little kids, and are they just dancers, or are they also in other kind of sports?
Yeah, so my portfolio is and I mean this as humbly as possible, is incredibly diverse. I've done 81 magazine covers now, and they do genres from motorsports, that's action, to portraiture, to fashion, to landscape, to equestrian. I've done liquid art photography. I did a book on that. And then my subgenre is like athletes. So athletes are like fighters and basketball, football, basketball, all those. But dance is really my passion. So much, in fact, that I'm building I think I told you this, I'm building literally a brand new home, a brand new studio, because I say this laughingly, but the dancers, like especially the older ones that are more professional, ages 18 and up, they're really tall on point. And you've been in my studio. It's for a home studio. It's pretty good. It's about 1,800 square feet. It's good size, but they're leaping off the paper because they do their garage in the air, and it's just hard to keep them on the paper. So I literally need a bigger space. So we're building a new home with a massive studio. I say this laughingly because that's one of the main reasons we're building a home is literally so I can build a much, much bigger studio with much higher ceilings and much wider space. But that kind of answers your question as far as what ages. I mean, well, if you think about what ages I photograph, I might do newborns. But I mean, as far as dance, I've done as young as I think about 5, I think, for 5-year-olds for dance, all the way up to I had a lady recently, I don't want to say her name for disclosure, but she was 56 years old and she'd been a professional dancer for years. And I photographed her last year. But the range, you know, I just love working with people. So I don't really have a, you know, per se, a particular age where it's like working with, but I do love working with younger people. As long as they have a sense of humor, which I find most younger people actually really have great senses of humor. And I'm really sarcastic and I love picking on them. And if they kind of get that vibe, and almost everyone I've ever worked with does, they kind of know. And I think because I treat them like an adult, like I pick on them almost like an adult. And I think they kind of like that. I hope they do. I don't know. I haven't got any complaints yet, but yeah. So I mean, I love the younger ones of that the energy of being really young. But more I look for is, are they dedicated to making you know, good images? And I've seen that as young as, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old that are just like focused, like I want great images, and they get really focused and they work hard and they're trying to perfect it because they know that this image could be on the wall of their home for the next, you know, whatever number of years. But yeah, it's very vast as far as people I work with. But if you're seeing a target, I would say females between the age of probably 15 to 25, I would say would be probably about 70% of the dancers I work with in age.
Okay, that's awesome. What I think, I'm going to be honest, what I think is also great about your story is that I'm seeing through you that you're a person who has taken many risks in your life, tried many different things in terms of your career, like even the, you know, the types of photography you're going to, the types of sports. And I'm pretty sure that played a huge role into you going to building your own business, you know, building the company that you said you have the supplement fitness company. What made you go in that direction and, you know, of being an entrepreneur, of chasing after your dreams? Because I know there's, you know, I have a lot of people who follow me who are either on this journey or are thinking about considering this journey and doing something that they actually are passionate about and putting all their energy and efforts into mastering those skills and getting known for the kind of work that they do. What would it be something you would tell them based on your experience and what you have, you know, how far you've come because of that?
It's a great question. I would say probably my best is live life with passion. You know, do something you love doing. If you love doing it, it doesn't feel like work. I stay up late at night. You'd be shocked. I mean, well, maybe not, I guess, but I mean, 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes editing photos, going through things, but it didn't feel like work. I don't feel like, oh, I hate this. This is, you know, terrible. And, you know, I am definitely a professional photographer. Been doing it for a while. I purposely haven't done it full time yet. And part of the reason I haven't done it full time yet is because I love it so much. And what I don't ever want to feel like, I don't want to feel like it's work. Like at the minute it feels like work, I don't think I'll ever lose my passion, but it's going to feel like, oh, now I have a photo shoot come up. I mean, I literally look forward to all photo shoots. And even when I worked the day you came with your daughter, I did, I think, like 12 shoots that day. It was a lot. At the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I am exhausted because you're shooting all day. You're trying to be on your A game. But I still love it. Like I woke up more, I look forward to it. At the end of the night, I started working on the photos immediately. So I would say, you know, live life full of passion. And my entrepreneurial spirit kind of comes from my dad. My dad is a self-made man. He never finished high school, and he ended up building his own company, on his own construction company for 50 years. He owned it for. And he was also the mayor of our hometown in upstate New York.
That's awesome.
For 6 years. And so my dad did a lot of things. He had a lot of irons in the fire, self-made, self-educated, which the irony is people think when they think photography, like, oh, you must have took it in school and all that. And here's the really funny part, and this kind of ties it all together, is I never took a photography class in my entire life.
That's awesome.
I went to school. I took one, where part of my passion came from with photography is I took a class on art history, but it wasn't a photography class. It was really more, we talked about like Gothic cathedrals, and we talked about that period of time in like the Renaissance period when they built these, you know, cathedrals. And I got fascinated with the looking. And I grew up in a really, really small town in upstate New York, the middle of nowhere. Like I never went anywhere. I was a country boy. And to see these amazing places, I'm like, wow, someday I'm going to go photograph something like that. And that came from one class, not a whole, like a series of one class, an art history class that I took. I didn't know why I took it because my major was health science, which has nothing to do with art history. So I'm trying to think of how I come up with that. But yeah, so I fell in love with it. And so I studied in college, I studied art history, I studied health science, which is basically how the body operates, how the human body is. And I, as an athlete, so I tied it into it and how to eat and nutrition and fitness. And that was really my field forever. So there's people that know me and they only know my health and wellness and fitness background, which is pretty extensive. You're a retired athlete, all that. And then I have photography, and they're literally two polar opposite worlds. I know people that I've worked with years photography have no idea my background. I don't know as an athlete or anything. I mean, I'm a bigger guy. You can probably see I did something, but they have no idea. And then I have people that I grew up with that unless they follow my social media pages, they don't know how much I'm into photography. Like even if
That's funny.
A couple years, I'm like, no, like 30 years. I've been doing it for a long time. But no, so really how all this came about really is over the years, I'd owned businesses, several different businesses. I had 10 of them all throughout fitness centers, all throughout the North Carolinas. And I was a regional guy and I owned part of it. So I was driving almost every week. And every time I left town, I'd bring a book, a photography book on a subject. And that's one of the reasons I shoot in so many different genres. I might be on macro photography one time. This might be on portraiture. This might be on wedding photography. This one might be on landscape. This might be on black and white. This might be on editing. And it's funny, if you can see in the background, if you see that bookshelf back there behind me, there's a couple hundred books. Those are all photography books. That's how I learned right there. All those books behind me back there. And I would just take a book with me and I'd read it. And then when I got back home from my travel, I'm like, oh, I'm going to try macro photography. I want to try photographing insects or whatever. And it was just my escapism. And it was so polar opposite of everything else I did. And the really funny part was for years, and I'm talking about like probably 10, 15 years, people that knew me really well, they're good friends of mine, had no idea how much I was doing photography. I just didn't know. I just didn't talk about it. I kept it all to myself. And there's still friends to this day that I'm close with that do not understand how much that I've published a best-selling book on dance photography called Art on Pointe. And they don't even, there's people that don't even know I published a book. So I kind of like that, to be honest. I know it sounds weird. I kind of like that. It's like, and no, I'm not bipolar or anything like that. I'm not crazy. I just kind of I like the fact it's a little different. So it's, it's a different world. So
well, that for me, it's very inspiring and interesting, because if you think about it, sometimes so many of us get stuck in one thing that we do, or we have learned when we were younger, or a kind of a career that we put ourselves into, and we're like, well, this is it, that's what I'm going to do. It seems to me that you're very open and curious, and you're allowing maybe your, interests and your thoughts and your passion to kind of like go a little bit this way and see how that goes. And sometimes people are so afraid of taking that leap. Like, what do I know about dance? Like, why would I go in that field when, I'm an athlete? Like, I should just stuck to what I know. I should just stuck to what I'm familiar with. And I love that about you, because there's nothing wrong with somebody having, multiple talents or things that they're interested on, and making that into either a hobby or a business. Because either way is going to fulfill them. It can fulfill them on a personal level because they're doing something that they love, but it can also fulfill them on the fact that they're building a business and they're, generating money doing something that they love. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's very inspirational, because I don't think people should be limiting themselves to what kind of field they go into, no matter their age, their background. There's nothing wrong with learning something new and going on a different direction, because you didn't even know you're going to like dance. It was just like, hey, let me take some pictures of this ballerina and look what happened, because I feel like you open yourself up to trying something new. That's what I would say.
And to this day, my friends, they really, I swear, and I even wrote this when I wrote my book. I wrote like the intro. I wrote that myself, and I said, the number one question I always get when people get to know me is, why dance? Like, why do you do dance? And that's why I wrote my whole thing of why dance, and how I, love the passion, strength, and all that. To this very day, I have close friends of mine that when I say I'm going to the ballet, they literally think my family is dragging me to the ballet.
Of
when
course.
I literally am buying the tickets, and sometimes I go by myself, and they can't believe it. And I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't get it.
Yeah.
So you just gotta look at things a little differently. And it's funny because it's an analogy, because I've been doing business training for like 25 years. And it's funny what you just said is that I use an analogy like this with potential clients. And I say this, okay, it's kind of like you and I are walking down the road, and it's a nice paved, even, flat road. And we've been there forever. We know the end. We can see the end. It's very easy. There's not a lot, we're not exerting a lot of force because we've been down this road before. Flat, paved, easy. Now, there's an alternative route. We get to a fork in the road. We can keep doing what we're doing, or we can go up the mountain. Okay? So it's going to be harder to go up the mountain, right? It's going to be more effort to go up the mountain. We might have to stop and rest when we go up the mountain. We might take a break. But when we get to the top of the mountain, the views are going to be substantially different than that road we've always been on. It's a different path. It's not going to be easier, but when you get out of your comfort zone, that's really where it comes down to. Where you're willing to get out of your comfort zone to do things that you are that are just, again, they're just different. And if you like that and enjoy that, then it's something that is going to be. I think too many people, you said before, they stay in their lane because either they were taught that way or they're too scared to do something different. And I'm the opposite. I like getting out there, and not that I'm this big risk taker that, I don't jump out, like I don't jump on airplanes. I don't do that type of stuff. So I don't mean necessarily that, but just doing things that are a little different that you don't know if you're going to like until you try them. And then once you try them, you're going to like them. And I've tried so many different types of photography, and some I love, and some I've tried. I'm like, well, I tried it. Maybe it's not for me in the long run, but man, you never know until you do it, really.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. That's really good. What would it be, Rick, some advice that maybe you would give to somebody who wants to start the photography path? Maybe you want to become a professional photographer, or even like a photographer in dance. Any, couple tips that you would tell this person?
Yeah, I would say probably my best tip is if someone want to be in photography in general, then my first tip I've got to give you is, do you want to do it as a hobby or do you want to do it as a profession? Because those are really radically different things. Most people take photographs. There's nothing wrong with that. That's 99.999% of the population. They see something, they take a photograph. They go, I'm a photographer. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and I don't mean any of this condescending, by the way. If anybody listening, please don't take it as such. A photographer makes a photograph. It's different. Photographers looking at all different aspects and angles before they even pull their camera out. Whether your camera is a phone or a DSLR or expensive camera, doesn't make a difference. My hero really growing up was Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams is one of the most famous and accomplished photographers in history. He's a landscape photographer. And what he used to say is there is a beautiful photo in every spot. Your job is to find it, where you frame it. What's your aperture, what's your exposure, there's what is an interesting foreground, how much of the sky, there's something interesting there. Your job as a real photographer is to pull it out, not just pull your camera out and click. Now, back then when he was photographing in the 1930s and 40s, I mean, he would hike a couple hours to get to one spot. And these are back before like paved roads were everywhere. You hike up through the mountains to get to a spot like Yosemite or something like that. And you set your camera gear up, and he would wait and wait and wait for the sun and their light to be perfect. He'd take one or two exposures and then pack everything back up and hike back. And he didn't even know how good the photo was until he developed it himself. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of a photographer who's creating. Okay. Now, the difference between a hobbyist and a professional is most people don't understand this. We like to think, hey, I'm really, really great at photography, therefore I can make a lot of money. No, it is more about marketing and relationships and all that. I know probably people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality.
They do. Believe me. I'm going to it because I think it's very important for people to understand, because that goes into anything that you're doing. You can do it as a hobby or as a legit business. And go ahead.
So, I was going to say is that most people will come in and like, hey, I'm a good, and I've seen people who are really good photographers that were amateurs and they wanted to stay amateur, which is, again, wonderful. You're doing it for passion, which is wonderful. I'm kind of that in between. I'm definitely a professional. I've been professional for years, but I don't do it as a full-time professional because, again, I think I'm going to make that transition in not too long once my new studio is done. So I will make that transition anyway. But it becomes different because then you're marketing and you're following up and all that. And those are things I love doing anyway. They're natural to me because I have a business background. So it's kind of a natural progression for me. But so I would say to someone, if you're looking at going to it, do you really want to be a professional or do you want to be a, amateur and just, create nice photos for yourself? If you want to be a professional, you better tamper your expectations because there are a lot of easier ways to make money than in photography. It is incredibly tough. And the reason why it's incredibly tough is, well, let's just say, for example, you're a landscape photographer, and I'll go into dance in a minute. But if I'm a landscape photographer and I go to, like I went to Grand Tetons a couple of years ago, and Grand Tetons are gorgeous, right? To Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that area. And I got some of the most beautiful pictures ever taken. I'm a pretty good photographer, and I got some really great photos. The problem is that one mountain range has probably been photographed a million times. How is my photos be that much radically different? And although I'm a good photographer, it's gonna be radically different than the other 900,000 photos taken of that same exact mountain range. Hard to monetize. Almost in this day and age, impossible to monetize photos of inanimate objects because most everybody's photographed them before. Now that transitions kind of into dance. Well, here's where dance is different. So if you're looking at dance photography, my suggestion is you have to understand timing. Timing is critical. You have to have the gear, but you have to understand timing and light. And to really be good at it, you have to understand strobes because strobes, flashes, and they're also called studio strobes, they'll freeze motion if you use them the right way. So if a dancer jumps and leaps and I'm photographing outside, and let's say I'm just starting to learn photography, and I'm like, well, all my pictures are blurry. Why are they blurry? Well, it's probably because the photographer doesn't understand the shutter speed. They're moving so fast, you have to do a very, very fast shutter speed. Well, if the light is lower in the day and they don't know that, they can't compensate for it. So they don't understand why their photos are not that good. And I don't mean in a derogatory sense, but they're just, the timing's gonna be off, they're gonna be blurry and all that. But if I understand how to use a strobe or understand the relationship or the adjustments to make in my exposure in my camera, I can capture that motion with or without a strobe, depending on how I'm gonna do it. So you really have to understand the technical aspects of it, and you have to understand the timing. And this is a really big one if you're gonna do dance photography. And this, I didn't do this with you or your daughters or anything else, but my dancers I work with, especially ballerinas that are doing pointe work, they are so particular, rightfully so, about their body. Like I'm talking about that foot if they're not over that box the full way, if that foot is not the properly winged, or if it's a little bit sickled, or they're making biscuits, as they say, or the shoulder's a little too high. It took me, I'm not kidding, it probably took me 2 to 3 years of photographing dance and asking a million questions of dancers to figure out really what I thought initially was really good and what wasn't. Now, I was a little bit, to this point, and here's kind of the trap for everybody who's thinking about doing it. The first dancer I worked with is a professional. So when she's hitting her grand jeté, she's hitting it. Like she's there, like she was over and over again. And my timing was good because I was doing actions, but I just had to figure out what's the optimal, like where do I want the legs, where I want the feet. Once you figure that out, you're pretty good. It's when you're working with people that maybe are not quite at that level, or they're getting it, they're split, but it's only happening for a microsecond. They can't hold it, they can't oversplit. That's where it gets really challenging. And I would say, and my honest suggestion is, if anybody's thinking about dance photography, is find a higher level dancer. And if you're just starting off, you're not going to be able to charge. And honestly, you shouldn't charge. I mean this. You should not charge if you're not good enough to charge, because it's not respectful to the dancer. But find a higher level dancer, and I would recommend you paying them. Give them, $50, $60 an hour, a couple $100 for a shoot, and go through, photograph them, and then periodically go over and say, what do you think? Show the back of your camera. Say, what do you think of this? And they'll tell you, really. They'll say,
right away.
Or you can see the look on the face. They're like, and then I see, I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. I'll get that off the screen real quick. Because the photographers, you're looking at so much. To do it the right way, even at this stage, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've taken a couple million photographs at this point in time. You're looking at so much stuff. Like in my studio, I've got like 4 strobes going on, looking at background, timing, lighting. I'm not looking at every little aspect, even as long as I've been doing it. So I would say, again, my suggestion is, if you're working with a dancer, take the photo and then show them and say, what do you think? And they'll be like, oh, my shoulder's a little too high. Let me do it again. I'll drop a little bit. This was over here. See, my hands weren't quite as soft as they need to be. And boy, I'm telling you, that will advance you years. If you did that, you want to do it, that's the way to do it.
And it kind of forced you, obviously, to learn the movements, the
Yes.
terms, the technique. You
Yes.
have to constantly trying to understand this because, yeah, like you said, otherwise you're gonna take this shot that you're gonna think is gonna be beautiful, and your dance is gonna be, oh, this is trash because my finger or my toe, my foot looks this way, my leg is just like, oh, I didn't
Yes.
know. So it's very important, I guess, obviously
Well,
to learn that.
Well, and I would say this as well, going on to that point, and one of the massive mistakes, the pitfall, this is a huge mistake for all photographers. I'm going to tell you this right now. If any photographers are listening, if you take a photo of a dancer and they're not in the right position and you start posting that on social media, you are doomed. You are done.
That's true.
Because that dancer is going to be, now hopefully the dancer is going to tell you. What's worse is if they don't tell you. You think, oh, I'm a great photographer. And so they're never going to work with you again. And then all their friends are going to see it. And then what's going to happen is none of them are going to go, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So I am incredibly sensitive when I do photo shoots of going, what do you like? What don't you like? And if you don't like the photo, especially if it's, so there's good photo, bad photo, and just ones that are okay, but they're not great. They're not bad, but they're not great. Well, the ones that are bad, they get deleted off the hard drive. I mean, I don't even keep them for any reason. I don't want them in case I mistakenly, not that I would, but mistakenly ever can go back to them.
Yeah.
And you need to do that as a photographer, and you're not going to hit every one. And when you're doing action photography, unlike modeling where I strike a pose, I can hold that pose for a minute if I need to. Dance, it's like a microsecond in time. And so, get that feedback and make sure that you know. And to any of the moms out there listening or dancers, give that feedback to your photographer. Do not be afraid to get feedback. And and I'll just say it, if they take offense to your feedback, you're the wrong photographer. I'm being very blunt, but you're the wrong photographer. That photographer should be grateful you're giving them feedback.
Exactly. I agree with you. And I think that's very, very important advice that, people are going to appreciate it. If they take it, I think they'll do well at it. And I guess I want to, finish up. Do you have your most memorable photo shoot experience? It could be in dance, could be outside of dance, maybe like some photo shoot that you've done that touched you. Why was it special? What made it so special? Maybe you never thought you would do it, or it was the experience with the person in front of you. Can you think of any moment like that?
Boy, I can think of a lot of moments like that, actually.
I'm sure you do.
I'll keep it in dance. So the first photo shoot was special to me. I know exactly when I took it. I know the model to this day, or the dancer's day, is a good friend of mine. We stayed in touch. I didn't put her as a cover of my book, and I told her why, because back then I just started. Although I did some lovely photos, I wasn't shooting at, in my opinion, a high enough level that I didn't want it on the cover, and she understood that. But she's the first dancer in the book, but not on the cover. But so that photo shoot is very, very special to me. That's what started it all. I'll never forget that. And we shot, she was the only dancer I shot for almost a year. We probably did 10, 12 shoots. I was just getting better and better. We did one shoot where we're inside my studio and we did powder, which actually, if you've ever seen a powder shoot, it's actually flour. If you do it the right way, it's flour, which is much healthier than actual powder. So we use flour. And so I watched videos and I'm like, oh, let me see how to do that. Then I study and all that. I'm like, oh, we can do some great shots. And so she's throwing the powder around. It's going great. And powder and electronics, they don't match. So I blew up 2 of my strobes.
You did.
These things are $2,000 each. And I blew up 2 of them. They didn't come around because that flour is really fine and it gets right in the electronics, because the electronics is open. So because these strobes so I only did a powder shoot in my studio one time ever. I never did it again. That was a very expensive lesson. That was
That's good, because anybody who's hearing this has never tried and didn't know, we will appreciate you so much. They're like, thank you.
And I would say the other one, I have one more. And there's a girl, her name was Anna Russell, who was the principal ballerina for the Moscow Ballet. Very high level, very, very, very high level. And she had lived in Denmark at the time. We became friends through social media. And I said to her, look, I said, I want to work with you. You're just off the chart. I've never seen a dancer like you before. You're off the charts. And I said, I want to fly to the US. Would you do like we're both, I mean, I was shooting at a good level. This was about 2 years in. And I'm on super high level, but a really good level. And she was a really high level dancer, but her photos weren't at a high level. So we were both a good match. I said, look, I'll fly in. If you want to work with me, I'll fly in. So flew her in from Denmark, and she did some poses. And in my studio, you've been in my studio before, they're on the wall. She's doing poses that I literally to this day, I've never seen anybody do before. She's like on point, all the way sideways, vertical. And she's held that for about 15 seconds. I've never seen nothing that come close to that. And it was, again, it kind of, it's funny because it was so impressive, and it kind of spoils you because I was doing dance for like about 2 years. I probably worked with maybe 25 dancers at this point in time. And the problem is then you think, oh, well, everybody can do that.
Yeah.
And you realize how hard it is. And she was and she's got her leg up and she's doing like a full split sideways. And as she's holding it, she's having a conversation with talking, not grunting, not grunting.
Oh my gosh, like it's nothing.
Like it was the easiest thing in the world, like walking in the park. And so it spoils you a little bit. That's the funny thing about dance. I have such a unique relationship with dance because initially when I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, it's not that hard. I'm like, wow, it's really hard. Then you work with someone like that makes it look so ridiculously easy. And so I've had other dancers. I'm like, can you do that? Like, I mean, I'm talking about like professionals. You're like, I can't do that. I'm like, oh, I forgot how hard that was. So yeah, I've got a lot of stories like that, but they're all really good. I've never had a bad dance shoot. I had one. She was a little bit older. She had no longer danced before, and probably it wasn't a bad shoot. But and this happens every once in a while. Like when people think, like they do like a garage date, and they think their legs are like parallel, and they're not. And it wasn't an argument, but and I won't say her name. She's really nice, and I said, no, they're not really getting there. No, they're really. You're missing your timing. I'm like, okay. So I put my camera on.
A different pose, a different movement.
What I did was this. I didn't do it to embarrass her. So I put my camera on where I could shoot 20 frames per second. 20 frames per second. So I mean, you're getting like the difference of movements like an inch. And I said, okay, I'm going to shoot about 40 photos of you doing this one move. And she jumps on about 40 photos, and we went through all of them. I didn't do it to embarrass her. I was just saying, well, see, we're not quite there. So she thought we were there. So yeah, that was about the funniest one I had. And she's super sweet, and it worked out fine. But that
happens. Yeah. In that case, hey, maybe sometimes you don't know. It's true. Yeah. You think it's not until you see the picture that you're like, oh, maybe I don't got that. I didn't know because it's so precise.
Well, you know what's odd about that, Nara, is most dancers, especially the young ones, like your daughter, they're doing stuff that's a lot harder than they think it is. So when you photograph, that's why I love photographing. Like they're jumping and leaping like I'll try to get my ideas like, okay, we'll do a C jump or a front stack. And like, I can't do that. And they jump and I get like one frame and they're like, I'm like, I told you you were doing it.
Exactly. For them, it's the complete opposite. That's what I love. It's true because, like my daughter can be so critical. She obviously she's all the time, thinking that she's not doing good enough. She could do better. And then she went to your photo shoot and she did all this movement. She got so confident because it was the first time she saw, oh, I can actually do this and I look good doing this movement because it's usually so fast that they can't really see. So that's awesome. So yeah, and Brian, he can put it on later for people to see. Do you have it? Oh, he has it. Oh, there you go.
Oh, was it approved? That's approved.
That's approved. It's not that. See, it's approved. He needs to get because he added all his photos, guys. So this is the before.
It's actually good. Actually, I'm glad he showed that's approved. That's not a final photo anyone saw. But
it's true. Yeah.
That's a good example of why I need a bigger
studio. Already.
Because her feet I know her feet were off the paper. That's why. So when I go in to edit, and those are just so everybody knows, those sheets are 10 foot wide, and I mean she's not her full 10 foot, but the perspective. So that's one of the reasons. Ironic. That's one of the reasons to build new studios because they leap.
And for me, those pictures were already fantastic, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna add it. I wonder how it's gonna look, and then you added the picture, and you're like, oh my gosh, it looks even better. So. It's amazing. So yeah, I mean, Rick, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for giving us this time, letting us know about you and, and what you're doing. And I think you gave really valuable information to people. So first of all, where are you located? How can people find you? How can they hire your services? Let us know a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I travel, though. I travel to different locations. I've to work with the ballet companies. I've worked with done in Florida. I've done in Nashville. I've done to Portland, Maine. So I travel a little bit, but I'm not a photographer that travels all the time. I have studios right here, but I will definitely travel to studios and to locations, but mostly shoot around the Charlotte area. And he's got it on the screen now. I see my social media handles are just simply Rick Balden Photography, and that's Instagram and Facebook. I don't do Twitter because I can't dance, and you don't want to see me dance. My dancers are like, you got to do Twitter. I'm like, I can't dance. You don't want to see me dancing. You don't want to see that. No one's paying to see that. My email address is really simple. It's rickbeldenphotography@gmail.com. And my website is rickbeldenphotography.com. So it's all Rick Balden Photography. So just the way it sounds, just the way it's spelled. And yeah, anybody can reach out. I love talking to people. I really do. And if you're in a different area and you're like, hey, I mean, maybe I'm not the right photographer for you, I'll be more happy to give advice. I really mean that. So if you reach out on Instagram or reach out and say, hey, Rick, what do you think? And this is a photographer I'm thinking of. I don't ever bash photographers. We're all different levels, right? When I first started, I'm certainly not the level I'm at today. We all start somewhere. But I'll give my honest opinion. And if they say, hey, I'm looking for this type of photography, or hey, I saw yours is really great, but you're not in my area and I'm in wherever, St. Louis, and what do you think? And I'll give you whatever recommendations I can. I'll always be honest. And, I love encouraging people. And I do have a newsletter that I'll send out. I'll send some tips and I'll send some things out as well, and kind of what I'm working on. And so, yeah, that would be wonderful. Please reach out, anybody that's out there, and I would love to work with your children, or you, depending on whoever's on there. And I work with everybody. So
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Rick. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me. I was really excited when you reached out. I really was, and that you remembered to do that. And yeah, your daughter was really amazing to work with, and you raised a good.
Yeah, it was so, you made her feel so confident. We love the experience. I can't wait to do another photo shoot with you. So we're in Brazil right now, but we'll be back in America soon. And I definitely want to get another photo shoot. She's much older now. She got different moods. She looks even more beautiful. And I can't wait to get together. And guys, if you have the opportunity, absolutely go work with Rick. He's incredible. You will love the results and even the whole experience itself. So I definitely recommend. And yes, I'm so excited that you said yes to this. It was a great conversation. And yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Nara. Thank you very much. I appreciate everything.